also over 4 years old. Our very first Brighton Hour was over 4 years ago today. Something happened shortly after that. Something else is about 4 years ago as well in a few weeks' time, beginning with C, but we won't talk too much about that because it was only a cold. Anyway, welcome to Brighton Hour. I'm here to do a little bit of the boring stuff, the admin, tell you where the bathrooms are, that kind of stuff. The bathrooms are over there if you haven't visited them already. There's also beer over there and soft drinks, the most important things. So I'm here to do the boring bits, and then we've got a couple of wonderful talks. There's plenty of stickers as well if you want to help yourself to stickers at some point during the evening. So we've done some networking. Hopefully you've met some new faces. It's great to see a few new people in the room tonight, and it's great to see some familiar faces sitting in the audience as well. We're going to have a couple of talks. We're going to talk a little bit about Earl, first of all. Earl is something very exciting that we're running. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to steal Abby's thunder, but we'll hear a little bit about our plans for Earl. Then we're going to have a talk from Olivia, and then we'll have a few closing remarks at the end. So we're your hosts, Data Cove. You can see me standing up here holding the mic, see Abby sitting in the front row over there. If there's anything you need over the course of the evening, if there's anything you want to know about Brighton Hour, any of the other events that we run, or Data Cove in general, please come and have a chat with us. We are a data and analytics consultancy, a Brighton-based data and analytics consultancy. That's why we love being back in our home city of Brighton. A lot of you are probably thinking, what does that mean, consultancy? So we help people understand and grow their businesses with data. And we do that by providing solutions in customer analytics, so unearthing your most valuable customers, marketing analytics, so where should you spend your next big bucks on marketing, and process automation, which I always describe as taking the thing that is most painful that you do every week at work and automating it forever, so you never have to do it again. Quite a powerful thing to say. Anyway, you can follow us on all of our socials. You can get in contact with us. We've got some cards at the front. Or just come and chat to us. You know, it's a small space. We're a friendly bunch of people. Come and have a chat, and we can talk to you about all things R and maybe another language as well. We don't actually have to say anything nice about Python tonight because Laura's not here. So, yeah, I've got eyes from Zach in the front row. Okay, we might say some nice things about Python at some point. Laura's probably watching at home and is probably heckling at the screen, and phone's going to be buzzing. Stop saying nasty things about Pi. So let's move on. We're really indebted to our hosts for this evening, Runway East and Silicon Brighton. I'd love to invite Viva from Runway East up to tell us a little bit more about the space that we're in.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming. So Runway East is just a beautiful co-working space company. We have offices in London and in Brighton. If you'd like to book a viewing, you can scan a QR code that's just on the desk there. And after the event, I have a little bit of time to show you around the office spaces if you'd like.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. It's a new space for us at Brighton Hour. It's great to come somewhere different. It's really vibrant. It's really lovely. It's great to see a different space in Brighton. Hopefully everybody here will get to enjoy a little bit of a tour afterwards. We couldn't run this event without the wonderful support of Silicon Brighton. This is where it all started. It's one of Silicon Brighton's kind of first user groups and first events. So it's really great to have Steve back here to come and tell us a little bit more about Silicon Brighton.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, it was our first one, wasn't it? Very first Silicon Brighton meetup was Brighton Hour. So, hi everyone, my name's Steve. I work with the wonderful Maureen, Charlie, and Grace, who can't be here tonight. We all organise Silicon Brighton. We're a community initiative. We support technical growth. We try to across the southeast. We're a kind of umbrella, I guess, for a lot of the groups down here. We help facilitate some of their sessions. We find them sponsors yeah, just make sure that all of these events can be broadcasted far and wide so that everyone can appreciate them. Lots of groups that we support. The list seems to be growing every month, which is fantastic. All of them are free to join. All of them, you can come in both person and join online. Everything's recorded too. So if you miss it on the night, you can view it turnaround's a couple of weeks, so bear with us. We get quite a backlog, but they will end up there in the end. And yeah, most importantly, everything's available to everyone. So they're all a slightly different order to what I'm used to. We couldn't do what we do without people that support us. So we've got a big list here of companies and freelancers, businesses who pay a little bit amount each month to help fund the work that we do, and it's super appreciative. So yeah, if you see your employer here, then definitely say thank you, and if you don't, go and tap them up tomorrow and ask them to get in touch. But we do need lots more help still. So a lot of the groups are in need of speakers, in need of sponsors as well. We've just rolled out a new sponsorship offering for larger companies who might be hiring, or new product launches, keen for a bit of positive PR, whatever it might be. Keen for organisers too. One of our groups, in fact, I think it might be listed there, Sussex Data Science down here, has just lost its organisers. So if there's anyone here interested in data, it's got a bit of an academic kind of aspect to it. Maybe you're from Sussex or Brighton Uni and you'd be keen to find out about being an organiser, then speak to us later. Volunteers, so we usually have a couple of people come along and help with organising the drinks and pizza. So if you're interested in volunteering, let us know. And supporters, that's companies here that pay a little bit each month. So yeah, we still need lots of help. We've got some values. I won't kind of read them out, but they're there. And we kind of, everything we do is based on these, and the groups that we work with echo these too. And as like everyone, we're social too. So LinkedIn, Instagram, X, and TikTok. And you can join our Slack. So all the group, everyone here is on Slack too. If you need another Slack channel, then that's the one to add. And we've got some other events coming up. So when's that? Tomorrow night. If you want to go out on a Friday night and talk gaming, there's game dev drinks. We've got Women in Blockchain next week, Tech Jumpstart. So next Tuesday's Women in Blockchain, next Wednesday Tech Jumpstart, and Ladies at UX next Wednesday too. And yes, that's a good one. Right, you on to housekeeping?
Yep, I'll take. Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. It's always great to see the expansion of Silicon Brighton as well, and all these different groups that Silicon Brighton are managing to support. The Sussex Data Science Group was actually the first ever meetup I went to when I lived in Brighton. So I'd love to see that one carry on. So if somebody in the audience has a passion for keeping that group going, then do get in touch, because it'd be really great to see the Sussex Data Science meetup continue. A couple of bits of housekeeping. So we have some speakers tonight. Our speakers are wonderful people. They would love to take your questions at the end of their talk, but they don't enjoy being heckled. No one enjoys being heckled. So if you've got a question, wait until the end. We'll wander around with a mic. You can ask your question, but please save it until the end. We are taking photos. We're recording the event. If anybody's a bit uncomfortable with being in any of the photos or any of the recordings, come and speak to a member of the Data Cove team or a member of the Silicon Brighton team, and we will help you out with that. So we're going to find out a little bit more about Earl. What is Earl? It's not some dodgy American TV show. It's not Earl's Court. So what is Earl? And here to tell us more is Abby.
How does this thing work? That one? Thank you, very helpful. Good evening, everybody. It starts off well when you have to ask how to use a clicker, doesn't it? If anyone went to Brighton Pi a couple of weeks ago, I'm really sorry, because this is the second time I've done this talk. It's not got any better. I think it's got worse, because I'm actually quite tired now tonight. So sorry if you're expecting anything brilliant. So a couple of introductions. Obviously, we've just listened to Jeremy talk for the past 10 minutes. You don't want to hear me repeat the same. Laura's not here because she couldn't be bothered, but we're both here at the front. I'm not going to introduce us as a company. We do data and stuff. We do R and Python and numbers and things. So that's probably enough for you. And they're all on the board if you've already forgotten what Jeremy said. If you wanted this to actually be helpful, by the way, I'm really sorry, you've come to the wrong talk. So we do lots of events, obviously, as well across the country, as Jeremy went through. So we now go to Bristol, Birmingham, Portsmouth, London, Manchester, Brighton, and Earl. I'm just saying that last time I actually did that and listed them all off. I got a round of applause for remembering it, and no one's given them. Thanks. There's a lot on there, and they've all been added in one go, guys. So apologies for the titles, because I got asked to do this talk the night before the event last time. And by reading them, you can tell how impressed I actually was that I was being asked. And when I showed this to my colleague, Laura, she thought that I was actually taking the piss, until she then saw that I'd left them on there, and she was awfully confused. But we're just going to briefly touch on Earl. So before I even start, how many of you in the room have heard of Earl before, with a show of hands? Oh my God, that is most of you. So you're beating Brighton Pie, and I'm pretty impressed. How many of you have been to Earl before in the past? Okay, let's change that. Everyone's hands is going to be up this time next year, I'm telling you. If it's not, then I'm not doing this talk again. So if you hadn't heard of Earl before, or you need a little refresher, this is Earl. This is still my favorite photograph that I found on the OneDrive just by chance the other week when I was scrolling through. I mean, look how great Jeremy looks. He's such a male model for Zara, isn't he? It's wonderful. So Earl is a cross-sector conference for R and Python. So we do a mixture of talks. We have traditional 30-minute talks and then some lightning talks as well, which are 10 minutes. We have workshops, which will be available on the 3rd of September. And then we have our traditional conference on the 4th to 5th of September. It will be held in Brighton in the Grand. And then we have an evening event in the i360, which is kindly sponsored by Posit themselves. So although I can't give any little leaks as to what the other workshops will be on, there's rumors that there may be another big tech giant coming that have a little bit, they have 4 little squares as their logo, possibly. So we'll see. And we also have some Shiny for Python ones. If anyone likes Python, Zach, please learn Shiny. You've got to do it. It's the only person I know in the room that does Python as their main language. So we do also have some wonderful keynotes for Earl. Some of you guys may know Andy, especially Lincoln, who is coming to speak. We've also got Crystal, who is the senior data scientist at the BBC, and Hadley Wickham, the author of the Tidyverse, and many other things are, which everyone is very excited to know that actually, yes, he is in Brighton. People seem to be very confused by that. It won't be virtual. He is coming to Brighton. So please do come and get tickets to see him. Thank you, Jeremy. So why should you attend Earl? I mean, we usually have 200 to 300 attendees per day. Most people are in senior positions and they represent large companies. And some of them you might just recognize. I mean, they're pretty big, aren't they? So if you want to get involved with Earl, you can actually speak alongside our giants as well. So you want your name next to Hadley Wickham? Scan the QR code and come and speak at Earl. Oh, you do also get a free ticket as well, so you'll get to stay and network while talking. So I'm just going to leave that up for a second just for people to scan. And the deadline is in March, so please do get your applications in, whether that's on R or Python, whether it's on software, data analyses, anything. So if you have spare money and you have no idea what to do with it, because it's something that we all experience, isn't it, right? Some people have said that. Then please do get involved and sponsor Earl. The opportunities start at £199, and we can do anything bespoke, something small but impactful, all the way up to having your name all over the conference. So please come and find myself or Jeremy and join our massive sponsors as well. So tickets. I believe the tickets will be going on sale pretty soon, hopefully within a month. And if you are interested in tickets, please sign up to the form at the bottom of this page here on the QR code, and we would love to see you there. Students will probably get a discount, and a couple of sectors will as well, and hopefully some Brighton R people, because we love you all the most, clearly, will also get a discount. So please sign the form to make sure that you're getting the announcements first. I'm just going to finish to make sure everyone's finished scanning. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, obviously come find Jeremy and I. I know Jeremy said everyone's eager to take questions. I'm actually not, so I'm going to go and sit down and hand back to Jeremy. And if you want to ask questions, then chase me at the pub. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Abby. I mean, that talk was even more embarrassing for me than it was the first time you did it. So I really appreciate all the wonderful pictures in there. Very much regretting putting them on the OneDrive, and there will definitely not be a photographer at Earl 2024. Are there any questions on Earl from the audience? Or do you want to save them all for a drink later? Awesome. I think you've all been wowed by Earl. We hope to see many of you there, and as Abby said, there might be a good discount for people that are part of our Brighton community as well. We want as many of you in the room as we can. So now moving on, we have a talk from Olivia. Now, I think when people come up with these talk titles, they want to put as many long words as they can into them, just to see if I can still say them after having a couple of beers. I've noticed this with events. I mean, I'm really bad at it. All my talk titles are really long as well. If you go through the Earl archives, like 3 sentences long for all the talks. So Olivia is going to talk to us about the studentification. Is that the right? Yes! Of Brighton and Hove. So if we can have a round of applause for Olivia, please.
Thank you. Hi everyone, it's really great to be here this evening. Tonight I'm going to speak to you about my own research, the studentification of Brighton and Hove. I thought this talk would be the perfect opportunity to bring to light some of the opportunities and challenges the Brighton community has been dealing with in the past, present and future regarding the student population. What I aim to do is walk you through the conceptual and theoretical framework, the results and discussion of this research, and finally get you thinking about how much you really know about Brighton and Hove yourself, but more importantly, how you can use art in your urban and segregation studies and how I deployed it myself. So, a little bit about me then. I have recently graduated from the University of Bristol in geography, and while I was there, I predominantly worked with large geospatial datasets in R. I quickly became fascinated with 2 elements: the spatial, when phenomena happens, and the temporal, when phenomena happens, to really understand why phenomena happens. As such, what I aim to do is make you see and understand the spaces and places you either reside in, leisure in, or work in a little bit differently to how you currently know them. To begin with then, I want to ask you all a question. What is the first thing that you think about when you think of Brighton and Hove? For me, it's normally the pier, seagulls, or the pebbly beach. But is that really the full true story? In essence, no. There is another story to be told about Brighton and Hove. In fact, Brighton and Hove is one of the most age-segregated cities in the UK. So what that means then is where younger generations live and older generations live are completely different sides of the city, segregating themselves from one another, which I'm sure may come as a little bit of a surprise. But I want to use Brighton as a case study to change the way that we're seeing our city and understand the issues that we're really dealing with. A study published in 2016 brought this narrative to life. The top 3 most age-segregated cities in the UK are Cardiff, Brighton and Hove, and Leeds. Brighton and Hove are actually the second most age-segregated city in the whole of the UK. So we are already seeing the severity of the issue at hand. Before I dive into it though, the structure of this talk is going to be split into 5 sections to really understand how we got to a place of Brighton and Hove being the most age-segregated city in the UK. Initially, I'm going to provide an overview of the concepts used in this study. First of all, cities are really complex spaces. Segregation is embedded in every single city, specifically in the case of Brighton and Hove through age segregation and studentification. Secondly, I'm going to walk through my methodology. Initially, I will explore the theoretical framework of the index of dissimilarity that I deployed in R, and then a critique of current quantitative and qualitative metrics to adjust them to a UK context. Afterwards, I will touch on the data I use and finally the steps in R. Then I will explore the results of this project and ultimately argue what is changing the urban landscape through age, student population, and housing type. I will then elaborate on what some of the consequences of age segregation are in terms of changing the urban landscape. And finally, I will conclude by thinking about future projections and what future research could do, with the overall aim of everyone seeing Brighton and Hove in a little bit of a different light. So then, the pivotal element of this talk is that cities are not neutral spaces. In an ideal world, it's normal to think that cities have come naturally to be the way that they are over time. But actually, cities are really complex living environments. So cities choose who is included and excluded in specific areas. Cities are entangled with historical, political, and social dimensions, which in turn creates a really unequal environment. One of the ways this urban inequality is expressed is spatially through residential segregation, whereby different parts of the city are inhabited by different groups. The most well-known example of this, which I'm sure you're all aware of, is ethnic segregation or class segregation. But what about age segregation? Well, age segregation is a phenomena associated with older generations residing in different areas of the city compared to younger generations. Fundamentally, though, age segregation is never addressed in enough volume in both research and mainstream media. It is presumed normal and natural for old and young to not socially mix. Their lifestyle habits, needs, and recreational facilities and activities differ greatly, so why would they? However, not mixing creates specific age clusters in cities. So then, I want to show you that the nature, the causes, and consequences of age segregation should not be ignored. But why? Why does age segregation happen? Why do young and old generations not mix in Brighton and Hove? And ultimately, why do young and old generations reside in different parts of the city? What is actually creating this effect? Well, as I'm sure you're all aware, university students are everywhere in Brighton. In fact, in the 2021 census, there were over 40,000 full-time students in Brighton and Hove, which is nearly 15% of the total population of Brighton alone. But what does that actually mean? Well, ultimately, students are changing the urban landscape, known as the student cycle, which happens in 3 stages. Stage 1. First of all, there has to be a reason why students are drawn to Brighton and Hove. There are actually 3 higher educational institutes that Brighton and Hove offer: the University of Sussex, the University of Brighton, and BIM. Stage 2. This creates a booming student population for a reasonably small-sized city. And then finally, stage 3. That therefore means that there are areas in Brighton and Hove which are occupied and clustered by students, creating these really distinct areas. But how does a large student population relate to Brighton and Hove being one of the most age-segregated cities in the UK? Well, if we start at the top, as we know, segregation is when different parts of the city are inhabited by different groups. From that, a form of segregation is age segregation, when different parts of the city are inhabited by different age groups, namely young and old. Finally, then, a process that can increase age segregation is studentification. The studentification thesis is when students and non-students reside in different areas. This in turn creates high age segregation as young students cluster together to form the perfect student living environment, whereas older non-students reside in different areas, driving separation and therefore segregation. So then, Now that we have an understanding of the concepts, segregation, age segregation, and studentification, I now want to build a story and answer what is actually driving segregation in Brighton and Hove. I'm going to argue that this phenomena has primarily been driven by the rapid increase in university students in recent years. Before I explore and discuss the results though, how do you measure the quantitative and geospatial dimensions of segregation? Well, residential segregation is a multi-dimensional phenomena, but in most studies, 5 quantitative metrics are used. However, segregation in this study will only be measured by evenness and calculated by the index of dissimilarity. The index of dissimilarity is defined as a differential distribution of 2 social groups among an areal unit. In essence, the index of dissimilarity measures the evenness of minority and majority populations that are either overrepresented or underrepresented in other areas. As such, where do different groups live? The index of dissimilarity values range from 0, no segregation, to 1, high segregation. This metric is based on Massey and Denton's work, which is in a US context. Their classifications follow that 0 to 0.3 is low segregation, 0.3 to 0.6 is moderate segregation, and 0.6 to 1 is high segregation. However, segregation in the UK is a little bit different to the US. In fact, segregation in the UK is much lower than in the US context. As such, new classifications are required, as it is legitimate to assume that segregation is unlikely to fall into these same thresholds. So then, low and moderate segregation in the UK is anywhere from 0 to 0.3. High segregation in the UK is more aligned to moderate segregation in the US, which is 0.3 to 0.6. And then extremely high segregation in the UK is an IOD above 0.6. So now I'm just going to talk you through a little bit of the data that I've used in more detail. As we know, residential segregation is a really complex spatial and temporal phenomena. As such, segregation can be driven by a range of variables that are often interdependent and intersect through various axes. While this makes urban studies slightly challenging, it also provides a narrative to conceptualize variables that are most appropriate to Brighton and Hove to really explore what is driving segregation. So, the data set. All of the data used in this study is derived from the UK census for the years 2001 and 2011. For Brighton and Hove, this is a period that was significant. The city was undergoing studentifying processes. So, comparing 2001 to 2011 allows for the extent that segregation in Brighton and Hove is changing to be explored. Age is classified to acknowledge both younger generations, that of student age, and older generations, that of retirement age, to consider the extremities of age segregation in university cities like Brighton and Hove. Moreover, occupation type was used as a proxy for class, more specifically the NSENC. Class in this research takes into consideration full-time students, which would not have been considered at higher levels of classifications. So acknowledging full-time students as a separate class allows for studentification processes to be studied. Then, tenure data is a proxy for housing type. 2 types were investigated that were owner-occupied and privately rented. Finally then, the lower layer super output area, the LSOAs, were utilised for all data analysis to acknowledge the importance of meso-level neighbourhoods for students. Instead of going through the mechanics of the code I use in this project, what I hope this talk is doing is showing you how R can be used in urban and segregation studies to bring to light what is actually going on in a city. Having said that though, the code for this project can be split into 3 main categories: ensuring the data is prepared and connected to the spatial elements of the data, then a geospatial investigation using the TM shape function to produce maps and visuals, and finally the index of dissimilarity was calculated and compared with every group. The packages used in this project were Proxy, SF, TMAP, RColor Brewer, Shiny, and Shiny.js. So now that we understand the concepts, the problem, the data set, and the metrics to use, we can finally answer and understand what is driving segregation in Brighton and Hove. More specifically then, why are younger students and older non-students residing in different areas? I'm going to split this results section up into 3 areas, but overall arguing that the most important drivers of segregation are age, class, and housing. So, this is a map of Brighton and Hove, split into these LSOAs, which are these meso-level neighbourhoods, often comprising of a few dozen streets. This shows a percentage of ages 20 to 24 in 2001. So then, we have these 2 large areas with a big presence of ages 20 to 24. First of all, in 2001, ages 20 to 24 were primarily concentrated in the north of Brighton and Hove. Specifically, one LSOA hosted 30 to 35% of 20 to 24-year-olds. This is where the University of Sussex campus and the Brighton Falmer campus is located, as well as first-year student accommodation, which is therefore a highly age-segregated and age-homogenous area. But also, in the centre of Brighton and Hove, there is still a somewhat similar narrative, where the Brighton University Moulsecoombe campus is located. So then, we are already seeing the comparison with young age and students dividing the city. Whereas if we compare this to ages 20 to 24 in 2011, I'm just going to move these slides back and forth. There are 3 spatial changes which have occurred. Firstly, ages 20 to 24 in 2011 cover a larger area that have sprawled all the way from the north to the south of Brighton and Hove, meaning that ages 20 to 24 are no longer just concentrated right next to the universities like they were in 2001, but they are instead getting what I call the student belt. This is a massive increase of students residing in specific areas of the city. So then, students may not be living in student accommodation that's often situated near their campus, but instead in student houses. Secondly, ages 20 to 24 are highly concentrated in more LSOAs. For example, LSOAs near the University of Brighton, Moulsecoombe and City campus are hosting up to 40% of 20 to 24-year-olds. So, to unpack this a bit then, LSOAs are these meso-level neighbourhoods, which are comprising of a few dozen streets. But if 40% of the population of one LSOA is 20 to 24-year-olds, that is creating a really high intensity of ages, which is where age segregation therefore comes into the equation. Another way that you could look at this, though, is on the peripheral areas of Brighton and Hove, which are hosting a maximum of 10% of 20 to 24-year-olds. So then, there is something that's attracting and pulling ages 20 to 24 to this student belt and this central area, going all the way from Falmer to the seafront. This is a map of full-time students in 2001, which mirrors a somewhat similar narrative to ages 20 to 24. In 2001, full-time students were clustering and residing near the university campuses. Up to 80% of full-time students were residing in the Brighton Falmer campus and Sussex University campus. But also, up to 40% of full-time students were also residing by the Moulsecoombe and City Brighton campus. Another important note is that only 17 LSOAs hosted more than 20% of full-time students. So every other LSOA in Brighton and Hove is hosting less than 20% of full-time students, which again is creating these really few high-intense areas of just students, whereas all other areas in Brighton and Hove are hosting very few students. This is therefore creating very little social mixing between students and non-students and increasing segregation. Whereas if we compare full-time students from 2001 to 2011, you can immediately notice the rapid increase of full-time students. You can see that the student belt, which is forming and spreading from the north of Brighton and Hove all the way down to the seafront, but also that the student belt is being squashed in a much narrower form. As such, full-time students are no longer just concentrated next to universities, but instead sprawling into all other areas of Brighton and Hove. as such infiltrating and dominating different neighbourhoods. But 4 LSOAs outside of the campus host up to 60% of full-time students. These are in neighbourhoods which I'm sure you're all aware of that are very dominated by students of Bevendine, Moulscombe, Roundhill and Elm Grove, which is creating this student-only enclave and driving segregation. But from 2001 to 2011, full-time students have spread greater across Brighton and Hove. However, this is not really that surprising, given the 60% increase of full-time students in that period. So then, students are spreading across the city as their numbers are increasing rapidly. While students in several UK cities have increased, most are not at the same exponential rate that we're seeing in Brighton and Hove. Fundamentally though, in 2011, ages 20 to 24 and full-time students are mirroring a similar narrative, which suggests that from 2011, the majority of the younger population in Brighton and Hove are full-time students, meaning then the processes of studentification and age segregation are interdependent and driving and dividing Brighton and Hove. As already discussed, studentification is a process that's really difficult to quantify due to the several dimensions at play. However, housing is also an important aspect in examining where studentification is happening and thus driving age segregation. Where students live and what type of housing they live in can vary depending on their year of study, but most often in first year, students live in student halls often situated near or by their campus, whereas in second and third year, students live in student houses, often outside or near the city. They are often privately rented and clustered in very small student areas and enclaves. This map shows the percentage rented from a private landlord or letting agent in 2001. This map looks slightly different from the spatialities that we've seen for ages 20 to 24 and full-time students. However, there is still a somewhat similar narrative at play. They are around the same LSOAs as full-time students and ages 20 to 24, creating these really compact student areas. Overall, though, student houses are age segregated and age homogenous, which is increasing segregation. Whereas in 2011, this changes again. First of all, it is crucial to be aware that the rise in renting is not just a phenomenon attached to studentification, but instead applied to the wider UK housing market. Having said that though, there is a link to where ages 20 to 24 and full-time students reside and rent. Renting is a clear dimension of studentification. Students want to live together. Students enjoy the freedom of living close enough to the university, but also far enough at the same time to have their own separate space. There are 2 areas where renting is high among full-time students, where the percentage of renting tenants that rented from a private landlord or letting agents increased from 2001 to 2011 is reaching up to 70% in some LSOAs in central Brighton and Hove. It is also important to remember that LSOAs are these meso-level neighbourhoods. So if 70% of one LSOA is demanded and carried out by student housing, this will create high segregation between students and non-students. Researchers have also come to notice the importance of the A27 corridor. This comprises of both Lewis Road and London Road, and where a large proportion of student houses in Brighton and Hove are situated. But why is this area that important? Well, the public transport links allow students to be far enough and close enough at the same time to their university and the connections that it offers. These transport links are available to both University of Sussex, University of Brighton and BIM students. So then, I hope a story of studentification and age segregation in Brighton and Hove is coming to light. Overall, young students are changing the urban landscape through dominating specific areas. To develop this argument a little bit further though, the index of dissimilarity provides a useful quantitative metric to understand the different spaces older and younger generations occupy and reside in. So as we know, the index of dissimilarity values range from 0, no segregation, to 1, high segregation. So then, all the young age groups were compared with older age groups to uncover what groups are the most segregated. This shows the index of dissimilarity for the years 2001, 2011, and the percentage change for the two groups that are compared. First of all of the index of dissimilarity values in 2001 and 2011 fall into the category of 0.3 to 0.4. And while this may initially appear low, it is actually the UK's definition of high segregation. This therefore means that younger generations and older generations are residing in different areas. So, age is segregated in Brighton and Hove. The most segregated groups are ages 20 to 24 and 85 to 89. In 2011, their index of dissimilarity was 0.48, which is an 18.38% increase from 2001. What this actually means then is that nearly 50% of the population would have to move to create no segregation. But if we take a closer look, from 2001 to 2011, every group's index of dissimilarity increased, with a minimum of 15.42% and a maximum of 23.89%. This highlights that from 2001 to 2011, segregation of younger generations and older generations are increasing rapidly. This therefore means that age segregation is a serious concern that needs to be addressed. Secondly, if we compare the index of dissimilarity to class group, class in this study is not limited to full-time students, but also other occupations. First of all of the index of dissimilarities values for class fall into the category of 0.2 to 0.3, which in the UK context is actually low to moderate segregation. But as we know, age and class combined is increasing studentification. The class most segregated is higher professional occupations and full-time students, with an IOD of 0.39, which is a 34.35% increase from 2001. This increase in segregation is potentially linked to the emergence of the creative class in Brighton and Hove, which has been associated with the rise in working professionals. But if we take a closer look again, from 2001 to 2011, every group's index of dissimilarity has increased, with a minimum of 11.8% and a maximum of 39.23%. As such, this aligns with the studentification thesis. Students are segregated from other groups in Brighton and Hove that are increasing at an exponential rate. Finally then, if we compare the index of dissimilarity to tenure group, first of all of the index of dissimilarity values for tenure fall into the category of 0.3 to 0.4. This falls into high segregation, which if we relate this to age segregation and studentification, housing is a clear dimension. But tenure tells a different story. The most segregated tenure group is owned outright and private landlord or letting agent, which is a 0.42 in 2011, which is actually a 12% decrease from 2001. But if we take a closer look again, from 2001 to 2011, every group's index of dissimilarity has decreased. Therefore, segregation in terms of housing has decreased. But even though the decline in housing segregation from 2011 to 2011 may initially appear optimistic, it is crucial to be aware that the rise in renting tenants is not just a phenomenon attached to studentification, but instead applied to the wider UK housing market. This is predominant in Brighton and Hove from the intersection of housing unaffordability and age segregation. Saying that though, we know from the geospatial maps that there has been an increase in renting in students relating to an increase in renting student areas. Overall then, all of these results highlight three important implications. Firstly, age is a key driver in residential sorting and location choice. Younger and older generations occupy different areas within Brighton and Hove. This results in different ages clustering in specific and small areas of Brighton and Hove, driving age segregation. Secondly, age segregation in the context of Brighton and Hove is highly driven by studentification. Students want to live together, but this creates clusters. The rapid growth of young students have created distinct student-only enclaves. As students want to be close enough to their university with all the amenities and recreational facilities that suit their lifestyle, this highlights the importance of the A27 corridor, which gives access to both universities and a sense of freedom. This is adding to age segregation though, as most of the younger population in Brighton and Hove are students. Thirdly, housing processes associated with studentification sees the increase in renting that have transformed neighbourhoods. These are located near universities through the creation of student enclaves, but have also expanded in recent years, dominating central Brighton all the way from Falmer to the city centre. In Brighton, high numbers of student houses are situated within Lewis Road and London Road, which is increasing the percentage of tenants rising. But at what stage do students then change the urban landscape from their distinct spatial residential patterns? Studentification arises when there is a clustering effect. As we know, ages 20 to 24 and full-time students reside in highly concentrated, clustered LSOAs in central Brighton and Hove, sprawling all the way from Falmer down to the city centre, which results in students driving student-only areas. Therefore, Brighton and Hove highlights the extremes of age segregation of younger students and older non-students residing in different areas that are highly concentrated. As such, when students live in particular areas, they change the nature of that area and the geographies as a consequence of their occupations in those particular areas, which can result in particular repercussions, namely social, economic, or environmental, for having high clusters of students in those particular areas. Fundamentally, though, studentification is a process which can catalyse age segregation. Studentification is transforming urban spaces, turning areas with a once relatively low student population into an area with high students. However, what is imperative to remember about Brighton and Hove is that neighbourhoods are studentifying year on year, increasing segregation between young and old generations from 2001 to 2011. So what this means then is that age segregation and studentification is becoming more of a concern for Brighton and Hove. Future research would, however, benefit by studying the current trends and social dynamics of Brighton and Hove. This could be undertaken by following a similar methodology that this study poses, but considering the newest 2021 census as well. This would allow further questions to be considered. Is Brighton and Hove still a studentifying city, or is it now studentified? Has segregation between young generations and older non-students increased or decreased? Even though these results were not spoken about directly in this study, it is legitimate to assume that age segregation in Brighton and Hove is still prominent and increasing, given the rapid increase of studentification from 2001 to 2011. And it is reasonable to assume a continued increase of segregation in the future, but also that the measurement of index of dissimilarity for age in Brighton and Hove may actually fall into Massey and Denton's category of extremely high segregation, which is an IOD above 0.6, even though most segregation in the UK is actually classified as low to moderate segregation. In conclusion then, Brighton and Hove is an age-segregated city. This phenomena has primarily been driven by studentification through the rapid increase in university students. As such, younger students and older non-students reside in different areas that are becoming more segregated and studentified over time. This study has argued that the most important drivers of segregation in Brighton and Hove are age, class, and housing. Overall, though, segregation by age is often accepted as normal and natural. But now we need to consider the ramifications of rapid studentification that can lead to major consequences affecting our urban systems. So then, I hope this talk has made you think differently about how students are changing the urban landscape of Brighton and Hove, but also that age segregation is rising and concerning. I hope it has also made you see a space or place in the case of Brighton Hove that is not just the piers, seagulls and pebbly beaches a little bit differently, but also how you can use art in your urban and segregation research. I've attached some of the references in case you wanted to read upon them, but thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Olivia. That was brilliant. I mean, I love Brighton Hove. I love living in this city. So any talk about our city and seeing maps of Brighton Hove on the screen and being able to understand more are great. Have we got any questions from the audience in the room? Any questions? We've got one from Fiona.
You mentioned some of the ways that, well, you mentioned the phenomena that these neighborhoods have been transformed. And I was just interested if you had some examples of what you think might have changed about neighborhoods based on your findings.
Yeah, so I guess if I went back a bit, so like studentification is like kind of a process. You can go down kind of different routes, you know, obviously the qualitative or quantitative. Kind of a qualitative example would obviously be going around the neighborhood. So for example, you know, it could be an area that was once a restaurant that's now turned into a nightclub, or, you know, something that's going to be applicable to that demographic in that area. You know, this transformation that's turning an area that may not be desired by students into an area that is now desired by students. You know, sometimes you could walk down the lanes, for example, and it might say something, you know, student discount on a Wednesday evening. You know, all of a sudden that's then a student area for that specific time frame. So it's adding those kind of specifics to a student demographic that they're going to love and pull and attract to. Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Brilliant. Any more questions in the room? Hands down. Any? Ooh, are there any online? Before, I mean, we can let Fiona just have a private Q&A. I've got a question as well, but I will let Fiona have hers.
I was just interested because I worked in universities for many years.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I note that you looked at 2001 and 2011.
Yeah.
I'm trying to recall when the government lifted the cap on student numbers, and I wondered if you'd seen any impact. I want to say it was perhaps later than that. I want to
think
say
it
it was like
was.
2018 or something.
I think it was, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I went to uni in 2020, so I didn't fall into that cap bit. But yeah, I think it was kind of the late 2010s, I think. But I mean, yeah, like when I did the research, the 2021 census wasn't available at that time. But I think it'd be so interesting to kind of see what that, you know, knock-on effect was, but also given the rate that it was, you know, the IODs, how quickly some of these neighborhoods were transforming, did that projection still carry on? Did it kind of, you know, I think it's such an interesting area that, you know, could be explored.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Fascinating talk. Thank you so much.
That's all right. No.
Hello.
Hi.
I have 3 connecting questions. Is there any specific reasons why you didn't use the 2021 census data for this study? Or?
Yeah, so when I was doing my study, the 2021 census data hadn't come out yet. But yeah, as I was kind of saying to Fiona, you know, I think it'd be such an interesting area to explore. You know, there's so many questions that you could pull apart and answer.
So do you run any similar projects for the 2021 data, or did you read any research on that? And is there any similar pattern for, or is there any increasing of the students' age segregation?
Yeah.
What's the implications for that?
So, I mean, I haven't done the research myself, but I'm sure, you know, lots of you guys here, you know, if you live in Brighton, you can walk down the road kind of 5-10 minutes and all of a sudden there's new flats that are being built specifically for students. You know, you're getting these student purpose-built housing, and already, you know, you're getting this age segregated, age homogenous area that's, you know, forming already. So I think based on that, I think my projections would be that age segregation is probably even more of a concern now than it was in 2001 and 2011. So yeah.
Yeah. And my final question is, Brighton is also well known with as a touristic attraction, not only for student city. So is there any similar pattern available for some other student cities like Oxford, Cambridge, or Bristol, as you studied there?
Yeah, of course. So with this study, because it was census data, that's available for the whole of the UK or England. So you can just specify what geospatial aspects of the census data that you want, and replicate it in whatever city you chose. So when I was at Bristol, I think a lot of people did their studies in Bristol, but I've lived in Brighton my whole life, and I thought when I went into it, I thought very naively, surely there's not an issue in Brighton. I think it's one of them topics where segregation, you think kind of ethnic segregation, class segregation, kind of the last thing that you think about is age. So I think when you do bring that into the equation, you get this whole new story that's kind of told. So yeah, you can kind of reciprocate this project in whatever city you want.
So sorry. So we presume, this is a pattern which is applicable for the other cities, other student cities as well. So is there any social or policy implications you suggest we need to implement some kind of policies to prevent or reverse this segregation in those cities or in specific to Brighton in your research?
So I think specifically to Brighton and specifically to age segregation, I think because it's not something that's ever considered, it's kind of presumed normal and natural. Why would someone that's maybe 85 be going out on a student night, full of 18-year-olds? It's kind of one of those situations where it's not really thought of as an issue until you kind of see the issue that it is creating. But I think as well, there's so many implications from age segregation. All of a sudden, if, you're not having that social interaction, that social mixing with someone that's older or younger, that can catalyze into so many different issues. So I do definitely think that it's something that needs to be looked upon. But what way that gets looked upon is probably quite a difficult challenge. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Surely Brighton Council, when it gave planning permission for the student blocks, knew that it was creating the problem. What did they do to ameliorate it at the same time?
I don't know that question. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. But, I think... But I think because it's, this is happening across university cities up and down the whole of the UK. You are getting these purpose-built student areas. So I think it's, something that, I could completely agree. It's something that needs to be kind of looked upon. Hi.
Being generation 1980 from Brighton, the kettling of students, you've got higher education, volume of students, demographics of, when I moved into Brighton, it was a rarity to go to higher education.
Yeah.
Now it's a norm. So you've got an artificial shift of individuals into education, into this. So what are the implications? Tribal misrepresentation, because tribes normally exist within age ranges. So there's a whole set of social disjoints that you're getting. I felt old at the age of 24. I'm now 63 and you still feel the same. It's a disjoint, but it's more so now than it ever was.
No, definitely.
And of the older generation that I know, they've kind of moved out, sold up to letters. The properties have gone to letting agents. Letting agents then get a fortune.
Exactly.
I paid 27 quid a week for my property in 1980. It's a bit more than that now, I think.
No, definitely. I think, like from 2001 to 2011, there was a 60% increase of full-time students. I think it's kind of a situation where do all those students go? You either build up or out, and it's such a difficult situation to kind of handle. How do you get that balance of letting enough students in but also, you know, having the well-being and the benefit for all the residents as well at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I
I
agree.
mean,
It's
having been called a boomer on a few occasions in Brighton, it's quite interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, it's okay for you guys. You've had it all good.
but yeah.
I think we'll make this the last question from Dean.
I'm a parent of 2 young children, and in Brighton and Hove, there are similar problems with a declining birth rate and schools closing, etc. Have you thought about adapting this to that sort of problem?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something, you know, obviously where the census is every 10 years. 10 years is a long gap, you know, that you have to kind of wait for this data to come out. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, so exciting, you know, you've got all this data, but then it's still, you know, a long period to wait again. So I think in that kind of situation, you will see those, you know, situations happening in the data itself. You know, all of a sudden you're going to have a massive decline in people going to university if there's no one going to university, you know. And then it's kind of like, right, okay, so we've got these student areas, but we don't have enough students. What do we then do now? You know, it's one of them situations where cities are really, really complex spaces, and you're going to get new people, old people in at all times. So it's undergoing this constant transformation. And I think it's definitely something that, you know, we'll probably see in 10, 15 years time. Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm sure we've got the space for a little bit longer after the talks, and I'm sure Olivia will stay around if anyone's got any more questions. Can we have one more round of applause, because that was a fantastic talk.
Thank you.
Right, Charlie's going to come and fiddle with a few things on the laptop, because I'm definitely not allowed to touch it, apparently. I've turned it off. Don't worry, it's not going to fall down. Just got a few announcements. Sorry, you've got to listen to me talk again for about another 2 minutes. I'm very sorry about that. But just a couple of announcements from the R community, from Data Cove. Data Cove are currently hiring. We are looking, as you probably heard tonight, we run quite a few events. We run events in Brighton and Manchester and Bristol and London and God knows what other cities. And we're running Earl, and we couldn't possibly do this as a small team on our own. We're looking for somebody to come and join us a few days a week initially to help with marketing, to help with events. So if, and I'm imagining in a room of arcaders, that might not be you, but if that is somebody that you know, please pass this message on to them. Please tell them to get in touch with Abby or myself. Come and have a chat with us at the end. We'd obviously love to have somebody local that loves Brighton as much as we do as well. So if that is somebody you know, please come and have a chat with us. A few dates for your diary. We are back with Brighton R. Somebody asked me when the next one was. I actually didn't know. I hadn't read the slides. We're back in May. So we're back at the end of May with the next Brighton R, but we are in other cities before then as well. We've got an Our Ladies takeover in Manchester in March. So if you fancy a little trip up to Manchester, wonderful place that it is. I don't think it'll be that cold in March. No, it probably will be. It's always cold. Zach's nodding. It's definitely cold. We're back with the next Brighton Pie. That's a bit of a way away in July. And then we're back in London as well. So we've got our next London R event on the 25th of April. And some more events in other cities that are not listed here to be announced soon as well. Can't say too much yet. If you want to join our community, we have a Brighton R Instagram. Someone runs it, apparently. I've got no idea who does, but somebody runs a Brighton R Instagram. God knows what's on there. Please join, follow us. There's a Brighton R Twitter, which also somebody runs, apparently. No idea about it. This is sounding really great, isn't it? We've got a community on Meetup. We run that. We know what's going on with that. Come and join that one. If you want to come and give a talk for us at Brighton R, just like Olivia did tonight. If you want to follow that, because that was a brilliant, brilliant talk, we want you. We want people to come and give talks at any of our future events. If that is one of you sitting in the room that can come and help us out, that would be great. If you want to come and give that talk remotely, or know somebody that would be a brilliant speaker for us, but they're not in Brighton, we're happy to accept remote speakers as well. Please, again, come and chat to us. Come and get in touch with us via Meetup. If you want to learn R or some other language that begins with a P, We can say, I think Laura's gone to bed now, actually. She's so knackered from today. So we can say nasty things about Python. If you want to learn R or Python, then we run training courses at Data Cove. We run lots of different training courses. Here's a selection of some of them. If there are areas in R or Py that you would like to upskill on that are not listed on here as well, please let us know. We've got some courses open at the moment. You can scan the QR codes. This is a bit QR heavy, I realize. There's a lot of QR codes in here. So we'll share some of these links with you separately tomorrow after we've all gone to the pub tonight. Last thing to say is thank you very much. We have got the space for a little bit longer. Some people might even be able to get a little bit of a tour, apparently. I'd love to see it. There's some beautiful disco balls going on in there. It's a wonderful space. Stay. We've got a few drinks left. Have a tour. We're then also going to the pub afterwards because we do. So we're all heading down to the Joker. We've got to tidy up, unfortunately. But you guys don't have to tidy up. Feel free to leave, go to the Joker. If you mention Data Cove at the bar, you get a little bit of a discount on your drinks as well. So we will see you all there when we get there. But all that's left for me to say to the audience online and to everybody in the room, thank you very much for attending this evening.
Thank you very much. We do have this space until 9 o'clock. So 9 o'clock sharp, we need to have cleared everything out. I can give a short tour downstairs for